Hello again and welcome. Today we're going to be looking at an old computer that was given to me a long time ago. We can see it was made by Hewlett-Packard. This is the hard case that the computer was shipped in. This computer did not function when I got it. Let's just open up the case. I'll let you have a look. What I have here are the tapes for it. This is a GPIB interface, or HPIB from the time, and this is a serial interface for it. Up here we can see quick access to the GPIB, and down here for the serial bus. So this computer was actually mounted inside of this case, and they would leave it in here, hard mounted. On the left here, this is the serial port cable for it. So unfortunately, this case had a bunch of foam in here, and this foam broke down over time. So there were originally more tapes inside of this holder. So there was a foam block down here, and those tapes were not inside of their protective housing, and that foam interacted with the tape, and it just created a huge mess. So what I ended up having to do was take this case apart, and I just washed out all that foam and crud, and then we just reassembled it. So the one thing I didn't do was remove any of the lettering. As you can see on the side it says Falls Church 4434T model 85. Same thing up here. Again, this computer was owned by Hewlett-Packard, and they used it in the service department. And here's the computer that came inside of the case. So I was trying to keep this computer original. So the one thing I didn't want to do was clean this computer to the point where we lost some of the history of it. So this piece of taped on paper up here, this is something that HP had done to the computer when they had it. So what this says is when using the new versions of the CS80 external exerciser tapes for the HP85, it gives a couple of part numbers, please be aware of the following. As far as we know, the tapes function correctly on the HP85A with the minimum configuration, which consists of the HP85A, the 16K RAM drawer, the ROM drawer with the input-output ROM, the HPIB interface, and the serial interface. We do know that altering this configuration or adding to this configuration will cause problems. Here's what we know, or at least what we think we know. Advanced programming ROM causes system to lock up at runtime. And again, if we look, we can see right here, Hewlett-Packard, made in Singapore, advanced programming. So they're claiming here that that will cause trouble with this, but again, this is the way that they were running this machine when it was in service. The plotter printer ROM causes mem overflow error. 128K RAM drawer causes the mem overflow error, doesn't appear to be recognized by the HP85A. The HP85B gets a mem overflow error, possibly because of the onboard ROMs. If you're trying to use an HP85A, our service units were originally A's and have problems with mem overflow, ROM missing, hangs, etc. It says try restoring the HP85A to the minimal configuration. If you try to use an HP85B, make the arrangements to get an HP85A. Regards, Bev Woods. So this is from HP's own service department. That's actually where my friend had worked when he saved this computer for me. This is the roll of paper that came with the computer. You can see on the side here, Hewlett-Packard Company. They give the location code. You can see the serial number here. This one is marked 204-4A18459. Hewlett-Packard, made in the United States. It came with these two modules. This is the 16K memory module, and it came with this ROM drawer as well. This ROM drawer came with the advanced programming as well as the I/O expansion. So the computer had multiple problems. Basically all the rubber that was used in this was shot. So the printer mechanism needed new belts. And unfortunately that rubber interacted with the plating of the case. So if I were to take this thing apart, you would see pits inside of that plating now. So I've had this thing totally apart. All that's been cleaned up, and I've installed brand new belts into the printer. The other thing was the capstan motor for the tape drive. Of course that has rubber as well. Of course I couldn't get parts for this, so I ended up taking that motor all apart and I chucked that into a lathe, and then I modified it to accept two silicone O-rings, and that's what's installed in here now. After going through all that work, I tried to fire up the computer, and sadly enough, it did not work. I started looking around the computer board and measuring the voltages, and everything looked right except the -5 volt supply. That was measuring about 2.5 volts. I started checking the temperature of the components, and there's an I/O controller chip that's located about here on the motherboard, and that device was getting quite hot. I ended up pulling that chip out. They're all socketed on this motherboard, and as soon as it was removed, the -5 volt supply went from 2.5 volts up to almost 5 volts. So I went ahead and replaced that IC, and I tried again to power it up, and there was still no activity with it. So I started looking, and basically the bus, everything was dead. So I assumed that the CPU was actually dead in it. So that was the next thing I replaced. And sure enough, I got the first signs of life. You know, it actually printed something on the screen that there was an error. So it still wouldn't boot, so I kept looking around, and sure enough, the keyboard controller had been taken out as well. I ended up having to replace that. So I don't really know exactly what had happened to the computer. I really don't have any history with it again. It was pulled out of service at HP. A good friend of mine had worked for them back in that era, and he was the one who saved this for me, knowing that I collected old computers. So this is one of the original tapes that came with the HP85. Again, this one was inside the plastic protective case, so it never got damaged. So I have to be kind of careful with these. I'm not going to be able to replace them. But again, there were tapes that came from that computer that weren't so lucky. They weren't in protective cases and they got damaged. So this is one of those tapes. This is what it looks like. Here we can see it says Certified Data Cartridge HP200 Hewlett-Packard Series 9800. Let me just zoom in here a little bit, kind of show you what's going on. So basically you have the two reels here. These are what are obviously holding the tape, but you can see it's got a small belt. So this belt runs around these three pulleys. So you follow the tape around, it runs around the outside perimeter of this reel, up through this roller, back around across the surface of this reel, and then back around. So as the motor and the tape drive spins, it's pushing that little rubber roller against this wheel here, and that along with the belt then drives the two reels. So these two are always in sync as far as the speed. So you can see can just take that belt right off of there. It's very thin. It actually almost looks like the same size of the tape. And you can see there's a small mirror right here, and there's a window under here, and basically what they're doing is shining a light up through here, and they're looking for a set of punched holes inside of the tape. So once it hits that, it knows it's reached the end of the tape. So if I were to spool this thing to one side, eventually we would come across those visible holes. So when this tape is inserted into the drive, it hits a little mechanical stop. It hits this little lip, and that opens up the door, and then that exposes the tape to the head. So the head actually would sit like right here. So I reassembled the tape. I was going to show you where the holes were, so I started to rewind this thing manually, and you can see this slight discoloration right here. See in the tape? I think that is probably where this thing had started to jam up. You can see like right there. I can imagine that pinch roller was hitting against this thing and just rubbing against that tape, and this thing was totally jammed up. Again, these things were pretty gunked up, and that's why I'm not using them. So somewhere along here, we're getting close to the end of the tape. I would expect we're going to see these little holes. I mean, that tape right there is stuck together. Oh, right there's our holes. It's almost like the tape is actually sticking on itself. I mean, I could just hear it creaking. You can see, maybe if I can get this thing close enough, right here and here are the two holes. Let's just run them. I don't know if you can hear that. The thing is just creaking. Let's just wedge a small piece of paper in there. So you can see like right here and here. So that's what they're using to detect the end of the tape. Again, I would never put these tapes back into the unit. Again, it may look okay, but I can tell you that the media on this is just shot. That's why I have no trouble taking it apart. I'll probably keep this one just for demonstrations, throw it in my computer collection pile, but yeah, this tape will never see service again. The last thing I'd want to do is risk damaging the tape mech at this point. So these are some other tapes that I've used throughout the years. This is one of the first tapes that I ever used. This was supplied by a company called Irwin, and this was a 20 megabyte tape. The only tapes that I'd actually seen before this were some of the ones that were used on an old CAD system that we had, and those tapes I believe were smaller than this. As a matter of fact, that could have used the same tapes as what this HP uses. So you can see that this tape, it's actually a little bit taller, tape's a little wider, but it's a similar design. This is a later one. This one's made by 3M. This is a DC2120. You can see this will hold 120 megabytes. And again, these two tapes, if you look at them, are very similar. This is one of my first larger tapes. You can see this one holds 150 megabytes, 620 feet. Similar tape and size. This is a DT4000 cartridge. It has 950 foot of tape compared to 620 foot on this one at 150 megabytes. This is a tape out of the very last DAT drive that I used. You can see that again, this is made by Hewlett-Packard. This cartridge could hold up to 120 meters of tape, and could hold up to 4 gigabytes. So these two tapes are essentially equivalent. But again, this is quite a bit older than this technology. Of course, the drive is physically quite a bit smaller for this as well. Alright, let's go ahead and fire it up. There's a small LED that's located right here. You can see that illuminates. And we get a cursor. And that's it. The machine is now booted. So this machine supports BASIC. So you could write your software right now. So like if we took 10 and then just said 4x equals 1, 2, 10. And for 20, we're going to say display x. So on some computers, the modern ones like the PC, you'd say print. And on this computer, it has a built-in printer. It's located up here. So if I said print x, it would print it to the printer. If I say display, it's going to come to the CRT. And then 30, we can just say next x. And then 40, we can say end. And we can type run. Or the computer has these hotkeys. So run, for example, is this button right here. You can see to the left of that is the step pause. So if I want to run it, I'll just press the run key. And there's our numbers from 1 to 10. And again, I think this thing is basically in calculator mode right now. So if I said like 9 and then times 10 and enter, yep, so you can see it's 90. I'd have to look at the manuals to see how to do anything really sophisticated with this. So my plan for this computer is not to learn how to use it and, you know, hack it or anything. I just wanted to get this thing running to preserve it and basically show it the way that it was when it was actually in use at HP. One of the things the computer has is a self-test mode, and that can be accessed by pushing the test button right here. So if I hit shift and test, and then we watch the screen, and it's going to print. And if we look, we can see it's printed essentially what's on the screen right here. Because of the frequency that this is scanning at, I'm not going to be too surprised if you don't see some funny lines in the camera. Believe me, when I'm looking at the CRT, this is very solid. And this is one of the service tapes that was supplied with the computer. You can see here's the part number for it. I'm assuming that they would have been using this to service some of their larger mainframes. So the tape, again, it just plugs into the slot here. And it's just that simple. So when we're done with it, we push this here. You can see it ejects the tape. So let's just start. We'll do a directory of the tape. And the way that's done is by typing in cat for catalog. You can see it hits the little LED. And it's rewinding the tape to the beginning. And here's our directory. And you can see this tape has quite a few programs on it. So let me just give you an idea how fast this is. So let's load up one of these programs. So we type in load, and then the name of the program we want to load. So we'll just take the first one. It's EX794 and X. And all we do is hit return. So again, this PC has 32K of memory essentially. So you can imagine that the programs that they're writing for this are probably quite small. They're going to be accessing the ROMs that it has to, you know, make their programming a little more efficient. But you can imagine that this program itself is going to be very tiny compared to a modern computer. But it'll give you some idea how fast this tape drive is. That's it. You can see it says load. So now I can do list. And there you have it. Now I'm assuming that this is calling the ROMs and stuff, so I would imagine if I run this, it's just going to crash. Oh, it printed something up on the paper here. So it says CS80 external exerciser, revision 2732. Assuming that meant something to them. What we can see here, it says error 124 on line 3600 ISC. So here's 3600. I wonder if perhaps, it's like dash all or something. Let's try 10 and dash. Let's try 10 through and 100,000. Yeah, I'm afraid I'd have to actually break out the manual for this and see how to do this. But at least it lets you see that the tape drive and the printer all work now. So another thing with this is this screen was in really bad condition. Fortunately on this one it wasn't cracked or anything, but it just was scratched really bad. So, you know, I thought I've repaired enough meters at this point. I was going to try to improve this a little bit, so I wet sanded that whole thing, and then I worked my way up to some 1500 paper. And again, I finished it off with this plastics from McGuire's and just rubbed it until I got it down to basically there's no scratches in this at all. I didn't make a protective cover for it. I think that hard case is going to do a fine job protecting the computer for another, at least until I'm dead and gone and somebody finds it and decides that they're going to throw this thing into the trash bin. The computer as it sits right now, it's basically complete. It's missing one piece, and that's the roller up here that holds the paper. So there's a small pin that fits through here. I doubt I'll hunt around for one. There is another decal right here. Again, this says by Hewlett-Packard, thermal paper, and it gives the part number 9270-0692. And then it's got a reorder number and a date code, made in Japan. So these are the components that came off of the motherboard. These are the originals. So again, I don't know which is which. One of these is the keyboard controller, and the other one's for the I/O. And this smaller one, this is the CPU. It's interesting if you take the time to look this up. This is all custom for HP. That was quite common back in those days that these companies were making their own CPUs. I'm surprised that we didn't damage more. This computer has quite a few devices that sit on that negative 5 volt supply. So whatever had caused this, it could have actually damaged quite a bit more, I believe. So again, I received this computer about 25 years ago, so this has taken a long time for this computer to get back to functional condition. It's not really that I spent that kind of time on it. This thing just basically sat in a box and I didn't do anything with it. So by the time I decided that I was going to repair it, it was very difficult to find parts to do the repair work. It's not that it's a difficult computer to work on. You know, it's pretty simple as far as the design, and schematics are available online. There's quite a bit of software and stuff for it. You know, if you had one of these, if you wanted to, you know, hack it or do whatever, all the information's out there for it. You know, it really is just the lack of parts as far as trying to bring these things back around if you had one and wanted to do the repairs. I think the big problem with a lot of these you're going to find is just that the rubber is decayed. But again, those silicone O-rings seem to do fine. That matched up just perfect as far as being able to read the original tapes. And if I did damage those silicone O-rings, all I have to do is just pop them right off of that shaft, put 2 new ones in, and we're good to go again. But to be honest, I don't see those things ever failing. Well, I think that's going to be it. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'd like to welcome all you new followers. Hope you're having fun watching the videos. I do quite a few different things on this channel. You know, usually it's about playing around with cheap multimeters and seeing how much stress I can put them through. Occasionally I'll play around with old computers like this. Well, until the next video, later.